Hare Krishna to all the devotees present here and online. Thank you so much for joining us for Bhagavatam class this morning. Today, we are very fortunate to have a very special guest with us. She's one of the early most senior disciple of our founder, Acharya, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And she had been an integral part of the pioneer years of ISKCON movement. It is my honor to introduce her, Grace Malati Devi Dasi. Malati Devi Dasi joined ISKCON in San Francisco, USA, and got her initiation by Srila Prabhupada in early 1960. From 1967 and onward, Malati Prabhu has provided many services to the ISKCON movement under the direction of Prabhupada, and I'm just going to highlight a few of them. So the following year in 1968, along with her 6-week-old daughter Saraswati, she was part of a team of 6 adults to first establish Krishna consciousness in the UK. With their hard work, an album Radha Krishna Temple was produced and released by Beatles group George Harrison, which also included Hare Krishna Mahamantra and other devotional songs. Her Grace Malati Prabhu then moved to India to assist in establishing the Hare Krishna movement there, bringing it back to its source. Her services included purchasing and shipping of temple murtis to establish deity worship services in the United States. Among these services, she has also cooked for Srila Prabhupada. So after returning to UK, she assisted in establishing the property known as Bhaktivedanta Manor in Watford, London, which was also acquired with the help of Beatles group, George Harrison. And while being in Europe, Malati Prabhu conducted traveling programs for women, thus sharing Krishna consciousness in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Denmark, propagating the philosophy, practice, and books of Srila Prabhupada. In 1990, she established an all-female ISKCON temple, which later was awarded a large roadside bronze plaque by the State of Ohio Historical Society, recognizing the center as the first Vaishnava or Hindu temple in training women in Krishna consciousness. Malati Devi Dasi joined the GBC in 1998. She's also a founding member of the Vaishnavi ministry. She advocates engaging women in all manners of service, inspired by Srila Prabhupada, who always engaged her in service. Malati Devi Dasi has facilitated activity in the past, such as annual international retreats targeted at promoting the spiritual advancement of women in ISKCON. Malati Prabhu currently resides in New Vrindavan, West Virginia, USA. She spent most of her time offering classes and instructions in Krishna conscious practice and philosophy. I just also want to add that Her Grace Malati Prabhu has co-authorized a book called Bond of Love. It is a compilation of personal remembrances of female disciples of the movement's founder, Srila Prabhupada, and it's available on Amazon.ca for those who are inquiring about this book. So today, Malati Prabhu will discuss Bhagavatam Canto 1, Chapter 2, Verse 16, relating it to her memories with His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. She would also give a brief talk on Gaur Purnima, as you know, is just around the corner. So please join me in welcoming Her Grace Malati Devi Dasi. Malati Prabhu, welcome, and please accept the
my sincere obeisances to all of you, those who are present, it looks like in your temple, and those online. Thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah, I am speaking now from New Vrindavan, and as soon as this class is over, I get in my car and I'll head over to Ohio up to Cleveland for 2 days. And we'll be celebrating Gaur Purnima there on Sunday, and I'll come back down here on Monday. So, you mentioned the book, and I just would like to mention a little further. The full title of the book is A Bond of Love, Srila Prabhupada and His Daughters. And this book is a compilation of about 350 interviews with lady disciples of Srila Prabhupada, direct disciples. And it gives a very deep and historic insight into the relationships between Srila Prabhupada and his feminine disciples. Up until recently, most of the books were coming from the experience and viewpoint of the male disciples. And at the time, which was around 2016, I was really feeling we needed to change that trajectory. So this was an idea that I had, and was given encouragement to go ahead with the project. So then myself and Vishaka and Kaishori were the main runners, but there were certainly other wonderful Vaishnavis who joined in for different parts and areas of service. And the book is about 600 pages, and as mentioned, it is available on Amazon.com. It's only $20, because this book was not written to make any type of financial profit. As the name says, a bond of love. This book is a bond of love offering to Prabhupada and all of the devotees in ISKCON, present and in the future, so that they may too also have some understanding of the very real and wonderful ways Srila Prabhupada interacted with the lady devotees. So now we get on to how do you do your class? You just start with the verse. Do you do Jairada Madhava? How do you present it?
Probably whatever you like. You can start with Radha Madhava if you like, and then we can get into the.
Yeah, I just always find it kind of weird to sing it and.
Oh, okay, we can just do a prayer then. We can just do a prayer and then we can start with the verse.
Okay. Om Gyan Timirandasya Janana Sakalaya Chakchum Militam Yena Tasme Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskachade Satarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I would also like to offer my respectful obeisances again to everybody. And as mentioned, I will say a few words on Gaur Purnim. In fact, it's a very sweet narration coming from the Navadvip Mahatmya by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And I think you'll find it very charming and informative. So back to Bhagavatam 1-16. Are you all looking at a book or at your device, or just to give me a like? Is there an answer? Are you?
We'll project the words.
Probably we will project the verse. I think he's going to do a screen.
The
share.
what?
He's going to do a screen.
Okay.
We can read it.
Synonyms before, because this way it helps people have an understanding what. So one who is engaged in hearing, Shraddha Hanasya, with care and attention, Vasudeva, in respect to Vasudeva, Kata, the message, Ruchi, affinity, Shat, is made possible, Mahat Sevaya, by service rendered to pure devotees, Vipra, O twice born, Punya Tirtha, those who are cleansed of all vice, Nishev Vanat, by service. So then the verse is Sushusho Shadadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Shan Mahatsevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishe Vanat. This is one of those, this particular chapter too was just filled with classic verses, many of which are recited often by devotees prior to giving Bhagavatam class. And the first canto itself, as you know, was translated and commented on by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, prior to coming to America. And if you notice some of the commentaries, they're so deep and they're so current. Like it's like he's talking to you right now in real time about what's going on here in the world. And then you realize, wait a minute, he came to America in 66, 65 actually landed. And this was way before he came.
She does have.
So please. So these commentaries show exactly how much Srila Prabhupada is in tune with Krishna. And he has mentioned on a few occasions that I have not written these. These are not my commentaries. When I would sit down to write, I would take my pen. Krishna would come and speak to me in my ear, and I would simply write what he's telling me. So you can just imagine how deep all of these commentaries are. And here we are, what is the date? 2023, of the year 2023. And we're reading things that just affect our life, point out the way life is meant to be, and the effects of not taking advantage of spiritual instructions. So, Su Shusho Shradhadan Nasya Vasudeva Kata Ruchi Shan Mahatsevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanat. So the translation by His Divine Grace. And another thing I'll mention here too is sometimes when people look at the word by word, the synonyms, and then you look at the translation, it can be a little confusing sometimes because some of the actual synonyms appear to be translated in a different way. If you've noticed that, and there's a reason there, it's because Srila Prabhupada is speaking from realization. So he understands what the intention is. It's not, we're not having a grammatical experience here. Even trying to put the synonyms into a different language, such as English, is very complicated because Sanskrit is such a broad language and there's so many ways a single word can be explained and used. So in the synonyms, you're just getting kind of a simple, you could say a simple explanation, but there's a whole big meaning, a deep meaning behind each and every verse. It's part of a large picture. It's part of the fabric of a spiritual tapestry. So that's why sometimes you don't see the exact synonyms that's translated in the translation. It's not that they're being overlooked, but we are getting the exact meaning from His Divine Grace. And I'm sorry, there's an actual word that describes this type of usage, and my little brain has forgotten that word right now. But when there's translations in this manner, there's an actual definition for that. So again, translation, O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Purport. The conditioned life of a living being is caused by his revolting against the Lord. Just consider that sentence. We're conditioned beings. Has any of us ever thought yeah, I'm going to pick up my weapons and revolt against God. But that's exactly what we did. That's exactly what has landed us in the condition we are now experiencing in life. So these men, there are men called Deva, are godly beings, and there are men called Asuras, or demons, who are against the authority of the Supreme Lord. Now, as a little side note, when Srila Prabhupada started using the word demons, one of the early devotees questioned, he first, yeah, what do you mean? So Prabhupada said, there are two classes of men, like he explains here, the godly, the ungodly, and the ungodly, there are demons. And the devotee said, well, that might be a little bit hard for people to accept, Prabhupada said, well, what can I do? That's what it says in the Bhagavad Gita. Anyway, the demons are against the authority of the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, a vivid description of the Asuras is given, in which it is said that the Asuras are put into lower and lower states of ignorance, life after life, and so sink to the lower animal forms and have no information of the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. So that's one of the problems of taking an animal birth, is the opportunity to connect with the Supreme Lord is not available. I remember, like, back in the early part of the movement in the 60s, transmigration of the soul, reincarnation was a topic very few people in general discussed or knew about, what to speak of understood. And it was just kind of becoming a moment of awakening with the sort of hippie movement that was bringing up different schools of thought and experiences. So reincarnation was something that was starting to be mentioned among certain persons, not the general population per se. So among the hippie persons, we all like animals. Is there anybody here that can say, I don't like animals? We like animals. Krishna loved animals too. Krishna even had pet dogs. I mean, they didn't come in the house, they were kept outside, but Krishna loved animals. And the animals loved Krishna. So it's not that we're against animals, but the idea that we would want to become an animal again is not very palatable if you think about the condition of being an animal. And, sometimes people would raise their hand, they'd ask Srila Prabhupada, yeah, but I like animals. I wouldn't mind becoming a deer. I wouldn't mind becoming a dog, I don't know why anyone would want to be any of those poor creatures. Just a few days ago in New Vrindavan, where there's many, many deer, but one poor deer got hit by a vehicle, and he did not immediately, he died, but he was greatly disabled. So we were trying to comfort him, knowing that the deer was going to die. This is the first time it's happened. So, we comfort him, her. And some person in the dark of the night came in a vehicle where we'd put a tent over the deer because it was starting to rain. So again, we were trying to, give it a little comfort, knowing he will soon leave the body. Somebody came in a vehicle and shot and killed the deer. It was caught. We have a little cameras around our place. So what a horrible thing. The poor animal was already in a distressful state, and some person just blew him away. So, I mean, animals don't have a whole lot to say about their lives. It's a life of just, you go through that life. But for a human being to think you might want to be an animal again, it's not really intelligent. It's not, it shows lack of knowledge. And again, in the Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, a vivid description of the Asuras, again, the ungodly people, is given, in which it said that the Asuras are put into lower and lower states of ignorance, life after life, to sink to the lower animal forms and have no information of the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. Even we're just, trying our best to be devotees. We're trying our best to serve Krishna, Prabhupada, your gurus. And we may not be on a high level, but at least we're connecting with Krishna. We know about Krishna. We know what he looks like. We know what he even likes. We know to chant his holy name. The animals and the lower classes by lower classes, we mean persons who have no connection and have no desire for connection with God. So we're unlimitedly fortunate. These asuras are gradually rectified to God consciousness by the mercy of the Lord's liberated servitors in different countries, according to the supreme will. So this sentence always astounded me, because when he wrote this purport, he hadn't left India yet, but he's letting the world know that the liberated servants in different countries, according to the supreme will. So he understood that Lord Chaitanya's movement would definitely be overflowing beyond the boundaries of India. And he knew that his mission in life was to inaugurate that spreading of Krishna consciousness. So sometimes it talks about, and it'll be how, like, especially with the coming advent of Lord Chaitanya, how the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, he was chanting and his chanting was heard all over the world. And we know he just traveled in India and within very defined places. So somebody may say, well, how is it his chanting was, this chanting was heard all over the world? But that's because he left behind the legacy, and Srila Prabhupada picked it up. And as a result, that chanting is heard all over the world and continues to be so. So the asuras are gradually rectified to God consciousness by the mercy of the Lord's liberated servants in different countries, according to the supreme will. So we're part of this fairly mystical operation where the Lord's name, form, pastimes are spreading around the globe. And hopefully we know this little Earth planet is not the only planet in the world, in the universe system, in the universal system. So that means what's going on here will also be spread eventually to other universes. It might already have happened, because we're only confined with our little knowledge of our little Earth planet, So these devotees, the liberated servitors, are very confidential devotees of God and associates of the Lord. And when they come to save human society from the dangers of godlessness, they are known as powerful incarnations of the Lord, as sons of the Lord, as servants of the Lord, as associates of the Lord. But none of them falsely claim to be God themselves. That would be something that I don't know if any of you have had that experience. When we were sent to India, it was mentioned how we were sent to India to begin the Krishna consciousness movement in India, ISKCON movement. We'd heard about people who said they were God, and as hippies, there was a lot of hippies who claimed to be God, or claimed we were all God, and that really depressed me, because I thought, oh my God, if I'm God, there's no hope for this world. But we never really meant full on, people who came out blatantly declaring to be God and trying to act that way. So suddenly we were faced by these people. Sometimes they had big, huge, puffy hairdos and, bright orange robes, and they would go like this, and some stuff would come out of their hands, and everybody would be, wow, It was just like a cheap magic show. And because we had been so taught, so well informed by Srila Prabhupada, we never got confused about these showmen. That's what they were, showmen. They weren't saintly people. They were just show persons. And they were claiming to be God. Or sometimes they were very clever. And they will say, well, actually, I don't say I'm God, but my followers do. And they would say, yeah, but you're not stopping them. Like when people would tell Lord Chaitanya, you are God, you're God himself. He put his hands over his ears, Vishnu, Vishnu, Vishnu. And these fools would like, well, I'm not saying it, my followers are. And yet they weren't correcting the followers. So we were always getting these really graphic experiences of what we have been taught by Srila Prabhupada, of what is being proclaimed in these purports. So it's a blasphemy. This is a blasphemy declared by the Asuras and the demoniac followers of such Asuras to accept pretenders as God or his incarnation. In the revealed scriptures, there is definite information of the incarnations of God. No one should be accepted as God or as an incarnation of God unless he's confirmed by the real scriptures. Just like on this coming Monday, we will be celebrating the advent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And his advent is clearly expressed in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 11th canto, 534. It's not like he just showed up and a few people got together and go, yeah, here's God. And he goes, okay, I'm God, but I'll pretend I'm not. It wasn't like that at all. So when this kind of thing happens, that people pretend to be God and followers pump him up, here's God. No, it's described clearly here, a blasphemy. The servants of God are to be respected as God by the devotees who actually want to go back to Godhead. Such servants of God are called Mahatmas or Tirthas, and they preach according to particular time and place. The servants of God urge people to become devotees of the Lord. They never tolerate being called God. So, of course, we understand that we think, that the spiritual master or other servants of the Lord are to be respected as God, as good as God. But that is far from claiming to be God. And that would never be tolerated by a true devotee, a pure devotee. So the servants of Mahatmas means great souls. Tirthas are often described as a holy place. And the devotees of the Lord are often considered tirthas because by going and having their darshan and association, one can become enlightened. And an important part to mention here, they preach according to particular time and place. And we have the most wonderful example of Srila Prabhupada coming to America at such a time when the whole world was, the whole world, I mean, particularly in America where he came, was like a stage. And there was all these confused people dancing around and pretending and to be one thing or the other. So it wasn't like he could just sit down and start exposing Krishna consciousness and get an audience. And yet that's exactly what he did. He took a look at all these confused souls and he didn't change the message. He didn't change the words. He didn't omit Krishna's name. He gave it purely and simply and honestly. And that is what attracted us to him. There was no watering of the milk, so to speak. So the servants of God are to be respected as good as God by devotees who want to go back to Godhead. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was God himself, according to the indication of the revealed scriptures, but he played the part of a devotee. So I just mentioned the verse in 11th canto, 11:534, in the Bhagavatam, where he is defined. So people who knew him to be God addressed him as God, but he used to block his ears, as I mentioned, with his hands. He'd chant the name Vishnu, 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 and he protested against being called God, although undoubtedly he was God himself. But the Lord, because he was playing the part of devotee, he was behaving to warn us against unscrupulous men or women who take pleasure in being addressed as God. So the servants of God, they come to propagate God consciousness, and intelligent people should cooperate with them in every respect. By serving the servant of God, one can please God more than by directly serving the Lord. The Lord is more pleased when he sees that his servants are properly respected, because such servants risk everything for the service of the Lord, and thus they're very dear to the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 1869, the Lord declares that no one is dearer to him than one who risks everything to preach his glory. By serving the servants of the Lord, one gradually gets the quality of such servants, and thus one becomes eligible to hear the glories of God. And the eagerness to hear about God is the first qualification of the devotee eligible for entering the kingdom of God. So this is a really important point about this eagerness to hear about God being the first qualification. Eagerness is very difficult to attain. You know, sometimes like we're listening and I want that, this is what I want. And then like suddenly, you know, within a few seconds, our mind is going somewhere else, or we're getting distracted by some other thought, you know. But this eagerness is not just a passing phase. The eagerness being mentioned here is actually a deep-rooted desire. That deep-rooted desire to hear about the glories of the Lord. And that deep-rooted desire does not allow for distraction. So the Bhagavatam is a natural commentary. It's described as being the cream of Vedic literature, and was presented by Sukadeva Goswami, who himself was thoroughly realized master on the Vedanta Sutra. We find this being mentioned in the early part here. I think what is our verse today? Can't even remember the verse. It's 16. So in the earlier verses, you know, it goes over this and establishes the unprecedented position of Sukadeva Goswami as a thoroughly realized master of the Vedanta Sutra. And then consequently, he personally realized the commentary, which is the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam is the cream of the Vedic literature. And the Vedic literature, Vedanta Sutra, and Sukadeva Goswami, he realized the commentary. And to show his boundless mercy upon bewildered materialistic men who want to cross completely over nescience, he recited for the first time this confidential knowledge. The comment about bewildered materialistic men who want to cross completely over nescience. So something to consider, each one of us, because we all know that there's a degree of suffering in our life, although we don't particularly like to be reminded about it. You know, when you sit down for class and the first thing the speaker does is start reminding us that we're all suffering, it's kind of like, oh God, do I have to hear this again? Although Prabhupada did say that it's, you know, that things have to be repeated in order to be realized. You know, just like when you're a kid, you start out in school, 1 and 1 is 2, and A, B, C, D, and you just like repeat those things over and over, and then you get it. So in the same way, we have to be constantly reminded until we thoroughly imbibe that we thoroughly get it. And the Mayavadis, those who are against the actual personal form of Krishna, they try to mislead by propaganda against the Bhagavatam. So we have to be careful what we hear. Just like Lord Chaitanya, he did not even want to hear kirtan by a non-devotee. And now I'm sorry to say, even though this was clearly stated by the Lord himself and taught by Srila Prabhupada, sometimes these Mayavadi kirtaniers, just because it's thought, oh, they sing so nicely, they play the harmonium or mridanga so nicely, we could hear these kirtans. But what is the effect? You know, it's like we're getting their disease through the ears. Just like when you go to the shop and you're going to buy something to eat, you're looking really carefully on the label. What's inside? What are the ingredients? We should be as careful what goes into the ears, you know. So in the introductory shloka of this chapter, the beginning student is cautioned to know that the Bhagavatam is the only transcendental literature meant for those who are Paramahansas. Paramahansas meaning completely freed from a material disease called malice or envy. So the Mayavadis, they're envious of the personality of Godhead. Despite Shankaracharya, who's their leader, Sripad Shankaracharya, he admitted Narayan, the personality of Godhead, is above the material creation. He understood that. But the Mayavadis, they don't have access to this Bhagavatam because of their envy. And those who are really anxious to get out of this material existence should take shelter of the Bhagavatam because it was uttered by the liberated Sukadeva Goswami. You know, it's considered a transcendental torchlight by which one can perfectly see the absolute truth. Truth realized in three portions: Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. And the highest level of realization being Bhagavan, Krishna himself. So, you know, foolish persons will say that the Puranas don't have any connection with the Vedas. Practically every day I see some stupid comment like this, or foolish comment like this on Facebook by even Krishna devotees who are somehow bewildered. But the Puranas are the supplementary explanation of the Vedas intended for all different types of men. Prabhupada he made an admission in one of the purports: all men are not equal. We like to, we're very fond of equality, isn't it? We like to say we're all equal, men, women, we're all equal. Prabhupada's black and white, all men are not equal. So what does that mean? There are persons who are conducted in the mode of goodness. There are others under the mode of passion, and they're under the mode of ignorance. So you cannot say each one is equal to the other because of the interaction of the modes of material nature. The equality is a matter of spiritual identity as soul. But while we're in this perverse material conditioning, there's no equality because we're all being pushed around and managed by the modes of ignorance or passion or goodness and a combination of them. So the Puranas are so divided that any class of men can take advantage of them and gradually regain their lost position and get out of the hard struggle for existence. You hear that saying a lot, you know, the hard struggle for existence. And sometimes maybe in your own lives, you just realize, I'm in this hard struggle for existence. Nothing's going right. You know, it seems futile. In the Bhagavad Gita, the person at 15:15, the personality of Godhead says that in all the Vedas, there's nothing but the urge for searching after him, Lord Krishna. And thus there's questions that pertain to Krishna. And these questions are the sum and substance of Vedic inquiry. So the conditioned person, any person in life, questions are there. Like the little bird when he wakes up in the morning, where's food? Where's food? immediately there's a question. There's a lot of birds where I live, so I hear them every morning, like, and if I don't hear them, I see them. Where's food? Where's food? So nothing different from in all living creatures. But what happens with the human being? That they're searching for answers, they're asking questions, searching for answers throughout our lives, but we're not satisfied because the satisfaction of the soul can only be obtained by questions and answers on the subject of Krishna. So there's so many topics we want to know about, why this, why that, but until we actually start asking questions on the topic of Krishna, then the satisfaction of the soul never occur. We can't even live for a moment without being questioned or without giving answers. And because the Bhagavatam is dealing with questions and answers that are related to Krishna, then we can derive the highest satisfaction only by reading and hearing this transcendental literature, this amazing literature that has been given to us by His divine grace. So one should learn Bhagavatam, and in doing so, then there's an all-around solution to all problems pertaining to social or political or religious matters. It's all there in the Bhagavatam. And Krishna, the Bhagavatam, is Krishna, and Krishna is the sum total of all things. Because Bhagavatam deals with questions and answers relating to Krishna, we can actually derive the highest satisfaction and success by reading and hearing this transcendental literature. And it's further stated earlier in this chapter that this Savai Pumsam Parod Naramayato Bhaktirat Hoksije Ahoituki Apartitahata Yayatma Suprasedate, that the supreme occupation, this Dharma for all humanity, is that by which men can obtain loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord, and such service and uninterrupted. So a very important point is this unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So this path of material enjoyment, it's temporary, it's miserable, it's illusory, it's inferior, all the things we don't want to hear. What? You're going to say that again? I remember sometimes devotees would almost cringe when Srila Prabhupada was just very commonly laying it out, just like here. Material enjoyment is temporary, miserable, illusory, and inferior. Oh no, I have to hear that again. We react like that because we're still attached to sense gratification. And we need these reminders. Devotional service to the Supreme Lord leads one to eternal blissful and all cognizant life. And therefore, it's the superior quality of occupation. But sometimes what happens, it becomes polluted when it's mixed with the inferior quality. For example, adoption of devotional service for material gain. Actually, that's an obstruction to the progressive path of renunciation. At the same time, better to ask Krishna for something than a demigod, because then if you get it, then, oh, thank you, Krishna. So you gain some appreciation, but it's inferior. The same with chanting. Sometimes they have kirtans, chanting for this, chanting for that. There's only one source. There should be only one source for chanting, and that's chanting for the pleasure of Krishna. And by chanting for the pleasure of Krishna, whatever you think you may need or want, that will be good, will be taken care of by Krishna. No need to dilute the chanting by putting it in terms of some material gain. So the living entity's sustenance of existence is to coordinate our activities with the Lord's with our eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna. Because why? Krishna is the central privet of all living beings. He's the all-attractive living entity. the eternal form amongst all other living beings, our eternal form. Every living being is eternal. And every living being has his eternal spiritual form. And Krishna is the eternal attraction for all of them. So by rendering devotional service unto Krishna, the personality of Godhead, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. And sometimes that can be a little intimidating, but that's the 7th verse in this chapter. And bhakti is meant for realization of the positive form. So when this positive form, meaning the spiritual form, is realized, the negative forms or material forms are automatically eliminated. They're there somewhere else in the world, but they are eliminated as distractions in our life. So I'm looking at the time, and I wanted to say a few words about Lord Chaitanya's advent. So I'll just find here that the Bhagavatam teaches one should not endeavor for sense gratification, that we should just satisfy the senses only as required for self-preservation. I mean, we can't just omit the fact that we need to eat, we need to sleep. If we're going to continue the species, we have to mate. And if we're attacked, we have to defend. These things are there, but they should not be the predominating features of our life. The seekers of the absolute truth, they're never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification, because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are actually just overwhelmed about searching and researching the truth. And in every sphere of lifetime, the ultimate end must be seeking after the ultimate truth. And these engagements will make one happy, because we'll be less distracted by meaningless varieties of sense gratification. You know, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Mangalananda. He was an early pioneer of the Hare Krishna movement with Srila Prabhupada. He's still around, but he was one of the early Hare Krishna musicians, and he wrote so many beautiful Krishna conscious songs. And one of them he's called the seers of the truth, freed from all illusion, above this world's confusion. We're all beginningless, eternal living souls, full of knowledge, full of bliss. The words of the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, when taken, are pure poetry, and the type of poetry that can lead us to be fully liberated. So then I want to speak about a little bit about Gaur Purnim. And as I mentioned, there's two books, Ananta Samhita and the Navadvip Mahatmya, and they're by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So this is a very charming description. That this Gaur Purnim is falling on the full moon of the months of Falgun, the month of Chaitra. And generally, at least in India, it's springtime, the best of seasons, beautiful, pleasing atmosphere. So you're up in Calgary, Canada. I don't know what's going on up there weather-wise, but springtime is pushing its way through, at least down in the USA and in Vrindavan, we're seeing flowers pushing their ways up, and, you know, just a pleasing atmosphere. Weather's warming up, the trees, the plants are blossoming, the air is scented, and the birds are singing and chirping. You know, they're happy too. Oh, this winter's over, thank God, you know. And it's during this congenial time that Mahaprabhu chose to appear on the full moon eve in Navadvip. So this Navadvip is a very special place, the topmost region of Goloka Vrindavan. And there in Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna performs pastimes with that cowherd community. And the most wondrous pastime is his loving exchanges with the gopis, the cowherd damsels of Braj. And of all the gopis, Srimati Radharani is the topmost. the spiritual sky is Krishna's internal potency manifestation, and the loving potency, the loving relationships manifest there with competition. So you might be thinking, what? We're talking about the spiritual world and there's competition? But in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Ujjvala Nilamani by Rupa Goswami, it's stated that obstacles increase love. So unchallenged love, it kind of just, it plateaus, it grows stale. Uninterrupted love kind of wanes. It means you lose interest. And a perfect example of this is how Krishna would tease Rukmini. Because Rukmini was just so obedient and so mild-mannered. So Krishna would tease her. He was trying to get her to, trying to get a rise out of her. Actually, I remember a class one time in Vrindavan. It was given by a grihasta, a husband. And he was telling how he and the wife, they like to have little fights, little spats. We're not talking about knock down, drag out, but little spats, because they give a flavor. So that was Krishna was trying to increase the flavor of his relationship with Rukmini. We know the saying, separation or absence makes the heart grow fonder. In other words, a separation can increase love because the person's not there. So you're thinking, where are they? Where are they? You're thinking about them. So these moods, these mellows, obstacles, separation, they occur in Goloka also. And sometimes Krishna has exchanges with other gopis. And this has the effect of angering Radharani. So there's, the two camps of gopis, one headed by Chandravali and the other by Radharani. And they compete with each other. They compete with each other, adding a little flavor of tension. So on one occasion, there was this eternal associate of Krishna named Viraja. And Viraja was extremely beautiful, like Radharani. It's described that she had crooked eyes. So that can be very enchanting, she would like flash her eyes. So one time, Krishna took Viraja to her kund, her private abode. And then Radharani noticed, what? Krishna's missing. Where is he? And she went looking for him. She found out he was happily engaged with the beautiful Viraja. This Viraja, she's always 16 years old. So Raja sensed Radharani was approaching. So she very cleverly turned into a river and Krishna disappeared. So when she arrived, Radha didn't see either Krishna or Viraja. So then she went to a special place between the confluence of the Ganga and the Yamuna. And there she created this especially enchanted place. It was incredibly beautiful. There were male and female bumblebees buzzing about. The trees all had scented fruits and flowers. The whole area was just filled with the fragrance of jasmine, malika, and malati flowers. And animals such as does and bucks were there, along with singing birds and roaming peacocks. And that transcendental abode was adorned with tulsi forests, decorated with various groves. Now, most of us have a really hard time in the West, especially in cold climates, just getting the tulsis to survive. And here there was forests, not just little plants, but big trees of tulsis. One time was Srila Prabhupada he was sent to South India. And I was sent also to be his cook. There was going to be a large program, and my husband was Srila Prabhupada's servant at the time. So I was sent down to cook for him. And I was sent from Bombay, now it's called Mumbai, down to Chennai, and on a train. And it was not a luxurious train. We used to call it 3-tier on the boards. It meant there was no padding. And at night, they would put these, they would raise from the bottom seat, a board would go up, and then another board until there was like three places, one on top of the other, and you'd be squeezed in there, lying on these unpadded boards. Very uncomfortable. And if you were unlucky, the one on top of you might include a kid. And in my situation, the kid was very liberally urinating all through the night, and it would just like leak through the boards. So it wasn't really a great trip. Anyways, I arrived there, and Prabhupada was being hosted by a fairly young couple. And there was a separate little bungalow for him. And next to the bungalow was kind of like another space. And in that space, I was doing the cooking. And on the first day, the wife came and she asked me, do I need some help? Did she help? Now I knew that I had been sent down there to cook. And I was just recovering from what is it called? When you get, anyway, one of the diseases you get in India quite liberally. And at the same time, I knew I was sent to cook, that he didn't want somebody else doing the cooking. But then I started thinking, well, I know I observed this lady and she made very, very nice rotis. So maybe she could help with the rotis, because honestly, my rotis weren't so great. Rotis should puff up, and my rotis did not always puff up. So I was always in like anxiety about that, So I suggested maybe she could, to her, okay, well, maybe you can help with the rotis. And she was really happy to do that. And because all her rotis were really puffed up. So as soon as I brought the plate into Srila Prabhupada, he took one look, he said, "Who made the rotis?" Like he understood it wasn't me. And so I told him that the lady of the house made the rotis. Now, here was another point. They were actually impersonalists, but, they weren't gung-ho Mayavadis, but they were impersonalists. But they were enchanted by Prabhupada. They were enchanted by the devotees. They were enchanted by the kirtans. So they were our host. So Prabhupada, he knew this about them. And he thought for a moment, and he goes, so I'm telling him she made the devotees. And then he goes, it's all right, she has Tulsi. Because at the door of their residence was a 6-foot Tulsi tree. I'd never seen such a thing. We'd seen little tiny plants, but here was a 6-foot Tulsi tree. So here was this place that Radharani made, and it was adorned with Tulsi forests. So we could understand that they weren't just little tiny plants, forest of Tulsi trees. So in this area was in Swetadeep, known as the Milk Island, and it was like an ocean of milk, and it was within Vraj. So here was Radharani. She made this place, and then she picked up a flute and she began to play, just like Krishna. He would play the flute to attract the attention of the gopis. So she's playing the flute. Krishna became attracted. He began to run in her direction. So Vrindavan is the most beautiful of the 12 forests. And we know these 12 forests as Madhavan, Kamyavan, Madhuvan, Talavan, Badiravan, Vrindavan, Bahulavan, Kamudavan, Kadiravan, Lohavan, Badravan, and Bilvavan. So all these forests, 5 of them, they're on the eastern bank under the patronage of Balaram. And then Vrindavan, Kandiravan, Talavan, Madhuvan, Kamudavan, Bahulavan, and Kamyavan, they're all on the western bank of the Yamuna, and they're under Krishna's jurisdiction. So he's running he hears the sound of the flute. He sees this stunning new place. He's just stunned, and he pronounced Nava Vrindavan, since it was an island. He said Navadweep. Dweep means island, and he named it Navadweep. And then he exclaimed, he sees Radharani, "Oh, lovely faced Radha, you're my very life. There's no one more dear to me than you, and therefore I will never leave you. Just for me, you have created this wondrous place. Staying with you, I will transform this place, filling it with new sakis and groves." And at that moment, he embraced Sri Radha, and they became one. And that oneness, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So these are the most wondrous effects of Navadvip, that the particular portion of the spiritual sky, this was created by Radharani, and Radha and Krishna became one there, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in this Nava Vrindavan, Navadvip, Krishna assumes the mood of Srimati Radharani and distributes Krishna Prem once in the day of Brahma, which we cannot even comprehend. The day of Brahma is incomprehensible to us. You can take out your little calculator and try to figure it out, and the calculator is just going to like go bonkers. So very spectacular situation. And Braj Leela manifested that Krishna doesn't award Prema Bhakti all the time. It's only in Braj Leela. And he showed that there were three types of intense loving relationships to the Braj residents. It's the friendship, the parental, conjugal, these three, special, more special, and most special. So when a devotee develops love of God and awe and reverence, it means he sees Krishna as God. And then there's Krishna's eternal servant who serves in Dasi, servitorship. And beyond that, there's the Vatsala, friendship, developed between equals, but who can equal God? And next, the parental devotee. And then there is when the parental devotee is when the devotee becomes like so-called superior, bigger, taking charge of Krishna, telling him what to do. We had this example with Janaki and Srila Prabhupada. Janaki was the first initiated female disciple. She was sometimes, she would tell Prabhupada what to do and even how to do it. One time, there was an instant where some crazy lady hippie girl somehow got in the apartment building and was banging on Prabhupada's door, and he opens the door and she rushed into his apartment. So Janaki and Mukunda were 2 doors down on the same floor, and Prabhupada went over to their apartment because, and then the door shut. So Prabhupada's like locked out of his apartment. This crazy woman is locked inside. So Prabhupada goes over to Janaki and Mukunda's, and Mukunda is taking the key to go over there to get this lady out. But Janaki approaches Prabhupada. She's shaking her finger and she was saying to him, Swamiji, never leave your apartment without the key. Never do that. Next time, bring your key with you. So she's like, chastising him that he went out of the apartment. Swamiji, don't go out without your key. So that was like it's parental, One time Prabhupada wrote a letter, and he never called us Mataji, by the way, never, ever called us Matajis. But one time in this very sweet letter, he said, my dear little mothers, and it was Jamuna, Malati, and Janaki. And then he said in the letter, another mother is mother is Govinda Dasi in Hawaii, and she's always asking me to come. So I think I will go there soon. Anyways, so that's another aspect of Krishna's relationships with his devotees. But conjugal is like the highest, it's said to be highest. It's irresistible. There's no formula. It's only in Vrindavan, by the grace of Krishna's yoga maya, that everyone forgets Krishna's God. That love abounds. So maya means illusion, or forgetfulness out of ignorance. But yoga maya is different. It's based on intense love. So therefore, Prema Bhakti is only in Vrindavan, in Braj Leela. And anyway, Mahaprabhu manifests in this particular place on earth with a special mission, and during the Kali Yuga with a special mission, a special purpose to distribute Krishna Prem, and therefore he's worshipped as Namo Mahavanandaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gauratize Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the most merciful incarnation. He has appeared in a golden color for the purpose of freely distributing pure love of God. The Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Oh.
So, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. You're done? Thank you so much for this wonderful lecture, Prabhu. It's very nice. I'm just gonna ask everybody if anybody has a question. I have a couple questions, but does anybody have any questions today? Prabhuji? Can you come over here, please? Krishna what? Dog pet? Okay. Okay. Prabhu, there's a question from here. One devotee is asking that if you can give us a reference where you mentioned Krishna had a pet, dog pet.
The what?
If there's a reference in the Vedas where you mentioned that Krishna also has pets, and if it's mentioned somewhere in the Vedas that he had a pet as dog.
Somehow that your voice is distorting for me. So I understand you want a reference from Vedas where Krishna what?
Krishna had a pet. You mentioned that Krishna also have pet. A dog
Oh,
pet.
yeah. Yeah. Radharani had a pet deer. Her deer's name was Rangini, actually. Krishna's dog was named Tiger. It's just some book. It's in a book. Oh, Krishna. You caught me off guard here.
Okay.
It's in one of the books by the Goswamis, and I'm not sure which one.
I wonder if it was
you-
also mentioned in the Krishna book. Because I know the Krishna book mentioned.
Oh, just a minute. I'm going to ask somebody here. And where is it mentioned? Like, I know it's mentioned Krishna has a dog. Radharani has a deer. The deer's name is Rangini, the dog's Tiger. Do you know which book it is? I can't think of it.
I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Isn't it Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur?
It could be. I don't know. Can't remember.
I'm sorry.
Usually we know. Yeah, sorry, both of us are we know it, but we can't remember the book. It's by either one of the Goswamis or Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur.
Okay. Is that good enough? I would just
No,
want to
I'm gonna have to look that up. I should know it. If I said it, I should know it.
But I thought I read it in the Krishna book as well, too, in the Radha book that they were describing their pets. Radharani has pet.
Yeah,
Parrot.
yeah, parrots. And the parrots will act as watch guards. They will send signals.
Okay, Prabhu, there's a question online. Somebody's asking.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. First of all, I would just like to thank you so much for giving us your time and explaining this wonderful verse so nicely. I mean, there couldn't be anyone else any perfect example who can speak on this particular verse, who has had the association of Srila Prabhupada personally and was able to render personal service to him directly. The question I had is, we often hear that the Western devotees, and that's a fact, they didn't know anything about Krishna, and it was all a very new thing, what Srila Prabhupada was teaching. So what was it? Was it about, is it related to philosophy, or is it something about the personality of the Srila Prabhupada that gave us this initial faith, Adho Shraddha, and what exactly, how it got transformed to that level of nishtha, the fixed determination by being in association of Srila Prabhupada?
Well, I mentioned that during my discussion, which was his pure, unadulterated delivery. He didn't cheat. We were used to being cheated. He didn't cheat. He didn't water things down. He didn't dilute the message. He didn't omit the name of Krishna. Even now, there are devotees of Krishna who won't say Krishna's name because they don't want to offend anybody, but they don't mind offending Krishna by not saying his name. This is a result of mixing freely and unrestrictedly with Mayavads. Prabhupada bravely warned us. He wasn't giving us something convenient. He was giving us, just like Bhagavad Gita, as it is. He was teaching it as it is. And we understood that.
Thank you, Mother.
Prabhu, there's one more question from online. It's from Minu. Hare Krishna, love the discourse. How to always keep in devotional service mood, even though having so many health issues.
How to keep in devotional service, even though there's so many issues? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, well, I mean, maybe you can narrow that down a bit. Like, let's say you're a household. I don't know. Are you a householder or a temple devotee or what? Or a student?
I
I
believe she's a
mean, issues can mean. What are you referring to exactly?
Health issues.
She's asking how we can keep our mood, devotional service mood, if we are going through such so many health issues. How
Okay,
can we-
health. You're talking specifically health issues. Okay, thank you. I didn't catch that part of it. Well, recently I've had a really, I would say, good fortune to be associated with two devotees with extreme health issues. And throughout their experience, both of them died. There was no recovery possible. They were young, early 40s. They had children. Each one had as a son and a daughter, young kids. But the bravery with which they faced their situation, which they certainly knew there was not going, the possibility was there of no recovery, but they tried. Anybody would try. But as soon as it became clear that there was no possibility of recovery, they were so fixed that they became an inspiration on anyone and everyone, including their own children. So we should always try our best to recover from health issues, which may mean taking time away from some of the other active things we do, including, maybe temple service or deity service. Getting one's health in order is a number one priority, because when you're not well, it's very difficult to do anything, what to speak of devotional service, isn't it? So that becomes a priority. Try their best. And at the same time, we shouldn't become overwhelmed or inundated with health issues to the degree we're forgetting all about Krishna. It's our duty to mold our life in such a way that we can remember Krishna 24 hours a day. So if we become overwhelmed and to such a degree we're forgetting Krishna 24 hours a day, that needs to be adjusted.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. There's another question from Shivankar Krishnadas. He's asking the Dandavat Pranam, thank you very much for such a wonderful discourse. In our limited capability, how we can express our sincere gratitude to Srila Prabhupada in best way.
Well, when you get initiated, a lot of the times the devotees, they come out and they go like this, try to get some money, right? Guru Dakshin. You've seen that, right? Yes, no? Okay,
Yes.
so that is, of course, one form of Guru Dakshin, but the real form of Guru Dakshin is to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. And in our case, the instructions of our spiritual master should perfectly reflect the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. So we are wonderfully protected in the Guru Parampara by our own spiritual master and by the presence of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, who reflected the teachings of Krishna through his own spiritual master. So that is the best thing one can do. And it's actually, it's something that really should not ever be neglected. That is real Guru Dakshin, following the instructions of the spiritual master.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for this answer. We have one other devotee. She's going to ask you another question online, and that's the Pastry Radhika Devi Dasi. Could you please, Malati, can you unmute?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, dear Malati Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam. Please accept my humble obeisance to you and thank you for nice class. And my question is, in early ISKCON time, no one knows Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. So how Srila Prabhupada introduced in West? I read book that you have sweet experience about with Srila Prabhupada that you bought a small Jagannath toy for Srila Prabhupada. Can you explain that wonderful story?
Well, that's getting a little late here, and it's not, it's a fact is that I noticed I was in a shop, an import store, and I noticed these, I didn't know what they were. They were wooden, they were colorful, they were small, they were smiling. And I picked one up with the big round eyes, black face, and on the bottom was a little golden sticker with black ink, made in India. So I was like, I mean, this was probably in February. I had just been initiated a month before, January of '67. So Jagannath came quite quickly early on. Not having any clue what it was, I took it back to my apartment and I just stuck them on a shelf over the fireplace. But then it was Mukunda and Shyam Sundar who thought, well, let's take it to Swamiji, let's see what this is. And to their astonishment, Prabhupada made his obeisances. So then he goes, who is found? And they kind of looked at each other and said, Malati. Well, Prabhupada lived 3 floors above the temple. And on the 3rd floor, sorry, he was on the 3rd floor. And I was in the kitchen cooking, which pretty much was my dharma in those days. So one of the assistants ran down and told me that Swamiji wants to see you. So I immediately turned off the stove. I ran upstairs. Actually, there was an elevator, but I was quite young and very healthy those days. I could run up those stairs faster than the elevator. So I saw that, I went in and I saw he was sitting on this little metal chest that Prabhupada kept his belongings in, but then he also used it as a desk. And he asked me, so you have found? I said, yes. And he asked me, were there others? And I was very enthusiastically, I said, yes, lots, because there were these 3 barrels and they were kind of full of. Prabhupada never became, bewildered by superficial mundane excitement. So I'm like, yes, lots. And he's no, very sober. No, 2 others, different. So I said, yes. He said, bring them. Then he points, he said, this is Jagannath, Lord of the universe. This is Krishna. So at that point, maybe some people could like, what? This is Krishna? I thought he was blue and blah, blah, blah. Where's his feet? Where's his arm? But at this point, we had already developed faith in Prabhupada's words. So he's telling us this is Krishna. That was Krishna. There was no shadows of doubt. And then he turned to Shyam Sundar and he says, so Shyam Sundar, can you carve large size? And he indicated a particular height, and Shyam Sundar readily agreed. So kind of that was the history. Then the next month in March, he was installed, they, all 3 of them, were installed in March of '67. It was coincided with Easter. So if you want the exact date, I think it was like the 24th, but you can look it up, Easter, March of 67, and you would find out. And interestingly enough, they were just installed wearing their painted clothing. There was no external dress, no crowns, no turban that year. And then, and just very shortly thereafter, in July, we had the first Rath Yatra. So it was in the next year, 1968, Rath Yatra Prabhupada surprised us by saying, so they must have dresses. And he drew a little example. And Juman and Harsharani were the ones to make the first outfits. And from that point on, then he was dressed. They were
Thank you.
dressed.
Thank you.
so much. Hare
Comment,
Krishna.
just one comment from the online from Mohini Murthy Devi Dasi. She just wants to say, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, very Nectarian class. Thank you very much. Totally blissful to hear sweet pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. So thank you so much, Malati Prabhu, for your association and giving us time today. We appreciate your company this morning and hope to see you again. We would also like to thank all the devotees who have joined us here online this morning. Thank you so much. So
I actually visited Calgary a number of, I don't know how many years ago it was, but it was a Rath Yatra.
seeing you then, that's when we come. But our Calgary weather has been pretty cold. Pretty cold. No spring here yet. Prabhu.
No, spring. That happened. One year in New Vrindavan for Gaur Purnima, it was on April 3rd. So you think April 3rd is going to be kind of okay. Oh my God, this huge snowstorm came. I live on the grounds, just like by walking, it was maybe like 3 or 4 minutes to the temple. But yes, I see Minos, and you stayed in our house. Yes, we did. So like, we couldn't even I couldn't even get from my house to the temple. I was supposed to give the class that morning and then drive over to Columbus, Ohio. I couldn't even get out of my own house. Sudden snowstorm, totally unexpected, But Krishna has his amusing ways of dealing with us. Yeah, I remember, this is Tamino. I remember very much the very sweet hospitality of your home. And actually on the way, we had a vehicle problem. And so I called ahead to find somebody who would get a mechanic, somebody who could fix our vehicle when we arrived. And so the first stop was to some mechanic shop where they had to replace our radiator.
Prabhu, we're building a new temple too. It's gonna be about 5 years since we will have our new temple. So please do come visit us in Calgary anytime, for sure.
Okay. Well, anyway, my best wishes are there for you all. Hare Krishna. Again,
Hare
thank
Krishna.
you for the invitation. I have to, as I mentioned earlier when I started, I have to take off for Ohio and going up to Cleveland for the weekend. So I'll be remembering all of you, and I wish you a very ecstatic, happy Gaur Purnima. And always remember Krishna, always remember Lord Chaitanya, always remember Srila Prabhupada, never forget them. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Ho.